Hey guys, Dodge Landsman here. I'm actually in East Liverpool, Ohio, about to set off into East Palestine to do a follow-up with the chemical train spill with a lot of people that I connected with. But before I do that, no, it's been a while since I posted. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about my presidential race analysis and just kind of giving people the very basic news without too much detail or too much kind of fluff into it. So you can kind of really get a good understanding and a pretty simple and straightforward understanding of the shifting dynamics in the race, particularly this week, which I think we've had the most amount of people enter and exit the presidential primary. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of people in, a lot of people out. So I think we will start with the biggest news. And the biggest news is that Joe Biden has a somewhat serious primary challenger. Of course, this is in addition to Marianne Williamson, who's been trying hard and has been getting a decent following on social media, but isn't as credentialed as Congressman Dean Phillips, the young congressman from Minnesota, young in his mid-50s, who officially announced he has his campaign bus. He went to New Hampshire to file the last day that you could potentially file for the New Hampshire primary, so he is off and running. And just take a look at Dean Phillips's pitch early on, before he decided that he wanted to run. His running is an impetus to say that Biden's too old and somebody younger should challenge him. Now, he didn't think, well, he wanted that to be himself, but he was initially calling for other candidates to enter this race, which of course did not happen.
As a Democrat, I adore Joe Biden. He saved this country. He can cement his legacy. My real call to action right now is not about me. The call to action is to ask the president to pass the torch. There is an extraordinary bench of people ready to go, proximate,
who would you like to see in this
position.
race?
I would like to see a moderate governor, hopefully from the heartland, from one of the 4 states that Democrats will need,
So
particularly.
let's see, Gretchen Whitmer. You'd like to see her, or is it Tim Walz, your home state governor, Tony Evers? Help me out here.
You just said a few names I think would be great. Josh Shapiro. There are a number of people. J.B. Pritzker. Some people have asked me that I not use their names because of this institutional fear that it might impact you down the road. This is the time to meet the moment.
So Phillips, as you could see, comes off as reasonable, I will say that, but he does not seem very charismatic. Also, in his politics, he is not challenging Biden either from the left or from the right. In fact, he said that he felt that Biden has been doing a fantastic job as president, but that somebody younger needs to fill the bill.
We will lead America back to its rightful and righteous place, both here at home and abroad. And we, the new generation, we will rise not through war but through peace. And not just here, but throughout the entire world. These are the issues of the 2024 presidential election in the United States. And let me tell you, America, I am ready to get to work.
So that's a bizarre explanation for a primary challenge. Usually when somebody challenges a sitting incumbent president, they have stark disagreements. And I could think of Robert F. Kennedy, who sort of ran to Biden's right, of course, with the vaccine policies and some of the border issues, and Marianne Williamson, who is still running, who says that universal health care should be expanded, that fracking should stop, that reparations should be given out, who certainly has a much more hard left position, even on Palestine, for example, as well. She has a much more hard left position than Biden. So she has very specific policy points where she feels like she is a better candidate over the incumbent president. Dean Phillips does not have those unique policy points that differentiates himself in any single way, shape, or form. The other issue about Phillips is, again, although he seems reasonable, he doesn't have a lot of energy. He doesn't come off as a jerk, but he doesn't really come off as likable either. He comes off as this very unremarkable milquetoast candidate. So I think a candidate that is essentially devoid of charisma won't have much of a shot. But I think at the end of the day, he might be able to win a state or two and give Biden a run for his money, for better or for worse. Interesting enough, Phillips himself has filed for the New Hampshire Democratic primary. And Joe Biden, as well as the Democratic National Committee, who have power over the rules in the Democratic primary, said that they will invalidate the delegates received in the New Hampshire primary. So Biden, his name will not appear on the ballot in New Hampshire because the DNC wanted more diverse representation and wanted South Carolina to go first in the primary process. Still, Williamson and Dean Phillips, so it'll be a mano-a-mano race with some skeleton staff of Biden trying to get people to write him in. But it's going to be a very, very interesting race because although the DNC says the delegates will not be recognized and not be seated, there could be a bunch of legality issues argued out through the courts saying that the state of New Hampshire was stripped of their primary rights. And even though the DNC has power over that is an illegality. So Biden could get very serious egg on his face if Phillips or Marianne Williamson get a handful of delegates, especially when Biden's not competing. Biden is taking this approach, which sort of harkens back to the 1940s and the 1960s, where an incumbent would not put their names on the ballot, but they'd feel that their support is so powerful and so overwhelming that the people would essentially draft them and write in their names. There were two presidents that had this idea where it didn't work out so well. That was Lyndon Johnson in 1968, where Eugene McCarthy, the senator also from Minnesota, but who had completely different policies than Johnson. Eugene McCarthy wanted to run to Johnson's left in the Vietnam War. He only lost to Johnson, where people wrote him in by a handful of 8 points, giving momentum to his campaign and calling Johnson to announce that he would not be seeking re-election. The same thing happened in 1952 with incumbent President Harry Truman. He was challenged by Estes Kefauver. Kefauver was known as this mob-busting Democratic senator who was also very pro-civil rights and cut a very unique figure for himself and was very popular in popular culture. And Kefauver, I recall, actually beat Truman, and that inspired Truman not to run for re-election. So that's the best case scenario for Dean Phillips, that there is some effort on the Biden staff to get Biden's name written in, and some people do write in Biden, but it's only 30%, and Dean Phillips gets 40%, or maybe even Mary. I think at this point, even though Phillips has a lot more money, Williamson has more visibility. They have as equal of a shot, which is very little, of getting the nomination. But that is Phillips or even Marianne Williamson's best hope, that essentially, because Biden put in too little effort too last minute, that he'll look like he has egg on his face because his team did try to get some write-in votes for him, but then he'll have the momentum. And he thinks that that'll force Biden's hands and force Biden to drop out before it's too late. Now, of course, there's so many more primaries now, which means there are deadlines to file, so it's a lot less realistic to do this than doing it in 1968 or 1952. But that's certainly the hope of Phillips. And again, Phillips is this moderate, grew up in privilege, went to a prep school, not that any of that matters, but he also owns a chain of coffee shops that are prevalent throughout Minneapolis, and he is worth tens of millions of dollars. So Phillips might be able to hang in there for a while simply because he has money. He could spend upwards of millions of dollars in his campaign, which certainly might help in the primary process. Now, I don't want to forget everybody. Robert F. Kennedy switched his candidacy, of course, from the Democratic Party to run as an independent, but replacing him in a less inspiring or impressive way is Cenk Uygur. And he is a well-known YouTuber, heads the Young Turks. I'm sure a lot of you people know him. And he has this cockamamie scheme that he could be president even though he was not born in the U.S., that he'll challenge the Supreme Court, and that he's going to be this movement candidate. I think out of Williamson, Dean Phillips, and Cenk Uygur as the alternatives, Cenk is by far the most ridiculous, least serious candidate out of the three. I think in terms of respect and in terms of media attention and in terms of competency and candidates that know what they're doing, I would say that Phillips and Marianne Williamson probably are about equal. I think they're both talented and both have their own talents and something to bring to the table. Cenk Uygur doesn't. Of course, he's running to Biden's left, to Biden's hard left, and also made the same argument that Dean Phillips did. Oh, somebody young needs to challenge him, and even Cenk said it's okay if it's a moderate person like Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro out of Pennsylvania, but somebody needs to challenge Biden, even though Marianne Williamson was already in the race. So Cenk thought he was more qualified and had more of a base, which I don't think he does, than Marianne Williamson, and decided to jump in. He has absolutely no shot, and just take a quick look at his interview style, because I think that's a fun part of this video. Is in addition to hearing about these candidates, you'll get these little clips of how they communicate and how they speak with people who are interviewing them.
Let's change the course. Right now, Joe Biden is down 24 points in the economy, 19 points on jobs when he actually did better on jobs than Trump did. He's down 13 points from where he was in 2020. He is not going to win. I am running. Yes, I am a break glass in case of emergency candidate. It should not have been me. It should have been someone else. But unfortunately, it was not anyone else. And now there's only 4 months left. We must change course. He has at best a 10% chance of winning. Donald Trump is an actual fascist. So I am running as a proxy. I'm running to win, but I'm also running as a proxy for any other candidate. We have got to get Biden out of the race. Thank you for winning in 2020. But if he loses this time around, it's not just his problem, it's all of our problems. I actually think democracy is on the line. And so if it takes me running, then that's what I'm gonna do. And we're all gonna do it together.
So as you can see, the arrogance is pretty astounding. And Cenk just does not come off as likable. He comes off as somebody who is very full of himself, who thinks the world of himself. And I think he's going to flame out the quickest. But I think there's going to be a real Democratic primary, these 3 candidates. That'll be interesting to focus on. Finally, in the GOP race, we have 2 candidates who have dropped out. 3 candidates who have dropped out. Of course, the biggest name of the dropouts is Mike Pence, who decided to drop out in Las Vegas and felt that it simply was not his time, even though he did say that God was calling for him to run for president.
I came here to say it's become clear to me this is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today. Now, I'm leaving this campaign, but let me promise you, I will never leave the fight for conservative values, and I will never stop fighting to elect principled Republican leaders to every office in the land. So help me God.
And this leads into our conversation, I think, about where his support goes and if Nikki Haley could potentially pick up his support. Because with all these candidates kind of dropping like flies, Haley might actually have a shot. So Pence was consistently polling at 3 to 4% nationally, which isn't much, but if he endorses somebody, if a big segment of that vote goes to the other candidate, that can make a real difference. 2 other candidates dropped out. First was Larry Elder. He's probably less significant than Will Hurd. The other one who dropped out, he's famous for challenging Gavin Newsom in the California governor's recall, of which, of course, did not happen. There's no threshold where Newsom could be recalled, but he did win the alternative recall election and was known as a well-known radio host, got in some hot water with some sexual harassment issues in his past, and kind of flamed out. So not that serious of a candidate. He decided to drop out, and he decided to endorse Trump and said that now is the time to coalesce behind the former incumbent president. Another one to drop out was former Congressman Will Hurd. Will Hurd was an interesting guy, had consistently won as a Republican in a swing state, an African-American gentleman who represented El Paso in a district that actually had very, very few black people. So kind of this person who could communicate with a bevy of types of people, and a really interesting guy. On the younger side, too. So Will Hurd decided that he would drop out and endorse Nikki Haley. Hurd was probably the most anti-Trump, maybe other than Christie or Asa Hutchinson, that they had in the race. And William Hurd even wrote a book called American Reboot, and he accused the GOP of being anti-LGBT and off their rocker in terms of these book bans and a lot of the social issues. He just felt like that was the completely wrong direction to take, and even spoke out against building a wall across the border. And of course, he had some expertise representing the El Paso area. Never caught on, and again, the guy was young and seemed incredibly smart, but just didn't have that charisma, he's relatively likable, but just didn't have that charisma or authenticity to ever really catch fire. So he actually decided to endorse Haley. So right now, the 3 dropped out candidates, 2 have endorsed, or 1 for 1, but I would say Haley got the slightly more significant endorsement.
But to me, the country is faced with a number of generational defining challenges. We deserve better than having a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We need people that are that understand that friends around the world are important. We need people that understand having laws on our, and preventing people from coming into our border illegally is important. We need people that are going to make sure that our economy can thrive at a time when we have new technologies like artificial intelligence. This is what the country needs, and I'm hoping that's going to be Nikki Haley.
But The reason I mention all of this is because pay close attention to who the candidates are dropping out and supporting. And for everybody who says that Trump is so far in the polls and that nobody has a shot to defeat him in the primary, I think there's a very slow shift that is happening that you really have to pay attention to and look at a handful of the polls to see that there is a viable alternative to Trump. And even though he is 60%, in almost every single national poll, 55 to 60%, in the state polls, he is under 50%. And there's an adage in politics where 50% is the magic number. If you're over 50% in a state, in these early primary states, you're very comfortable. But if you're under, and even if you're under 50% with 4 candidates running against you, splitting that remaining 50%, it's still alarming to be under 50%. So there is a theory that Haley was probably the candidate that all of the anti-Trump people initially should have coalesced behind. Of course, they did so around DeSantis, who has more extreme social views, who's less palatable in the general election. And again, with this whole likability factor, it's incredibly important. That's one of the reasons DeSantis is flaming out and is now seeing himself oftentimes in third place, not even in second anymore, because nobody likes him. He just doesn't come off as a nice guy. He doesn't come off as a guy you'd want to have a beer with. He seems like he's talking down to you the whole time. If he's not doing that, he seems robotic, emotionless, and over-rehearsed. There's just no there. A complete, overly careful, uptight guy that just doesn't connect with people. Haley, on the other hand, Haley initially came off as very cautious, and she got a lot of egg in her face when she talked about her position on abortion and never really locked it down.
I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children, so I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, we need to stop demonizing this issue. This is talking about the fact that unelected justices didn't need to decide something this personal, because it's personal for every woman and man. Now it's been put in the hands of the people. That's great. When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree that we should encourage adoptions? Can't we all agree that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we all agree that contraception should be available? And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion? Let's treat this like a respectful issue that it is and humanize the situation and stop demonizing the situation.
Later, she decided that she'd take a slightly leftward stance on this, which is a smart move, and has decided that she would not support a national abortion ban. And that would certainly distinguish her from DeSantis. So Haley, I think, came off as overly rehearsed, as overly formal, as not terribly authentic, but all of that changed when she played against type. And of course, in the famous exchange with Vivek Ramaswamy, where she was accusing Vivek of not supporting Israel sufficiently. That moment, she had the fire, she had the passion, and she kind of came off as an ass kicker and somebody who presents themselves as very kind and nice and genial. For her to come off as a shit kicker was kind of cool, because if like Hillary did that, nobody likes Hillary, so it wouldn't get that much support. But Haley is so good at coming off as this very magnanimous person. It was kind of cool to see her play the opposite and play it very well. So you could see she's a good performer on stage and is a very good communicator and kind of understands the audience intrinsically in a way that other candidates don't. So we'll look at a few of the polls that have come out within the state polls aren't happening every week, but there's a collection that have come out within the month of October. New Hampshire, one about 2 weeks ago, has Trump at 49%, Haley at 19%, and DeSantis at 10%. So Haley climbing into second place in New Hampshire. She comes off as moderate, a bit of a maverick, as McCain once came off as. So you can see why she'd play well in New Hampshire, but lucky for her, even though she's a moderate candidate and the one who goes against the front runner. New Hampshire people do not like front runners. That's why I think Trump is on shaky ground in this situation. He did win New Hampshire last time around, but they often have an opposition or reticence to vote for the guy who automatically seems in power. So she has some good momentum going to New Hampshire. Let's say she gets 10 more and Trump gets 10 less. That means Trump is at 39 and Haley is at 29. All it takes is a 10-point shift in the other one's direction. that's a case that she has she might have the momentum to win South Carolina. Remember, it's only a shift of 10 points that need to take place in New Hampshire for her to only lose to Trump by 10 to 15, which would be impressive considering you're kind of David slaying the Trump Goliath. South Carolina, Trump, there are two polls that has Trump at 47% and Haley at 19%. So again, very, very big gap. That's about a 28-point gap. And Trump 46%, Haley at 18% the other. A very big gap. But again, in all three of these polls, three polls in a row now, one in New Hampshire, one in South Carolina, Trump is under 50%. Haley, however, does have some catching up to do in Iowa. DeSantis is still holding on, but barely. Trump there at 51%, DeSantis at 13%, Haley in fourth place at 5% with Ramaswamy at 8%. So she has to do better in Iowa, certainly. But all these polls have all these polls have Trump under 50%, which means that there's potential to essentially close the spread in New Hampshire and maybe even win in South Carolina. Now, if I were to guess, I would say Trump still has a 65% chance of winning the nomination, but I would say Haley and Nikki Haley alone has a 35% chance of winning. Remember, with Trump consistently under 50%, right now it looks like there's still other serious candidates. There's Haley, there's DeSantis, there's Chris Christie, there's Vivek Ramaswamy. There's still plenty of other people with real credentials who could split the vote. But in the span of a week and a half, we've already had three candidates drop out, including a major serious candidate, which is Mike Pence. It'll be fascinating to see where Mike Pence goes, because in a close race, even the 3 to 4% that he has might make all the difference in the world. So I would say Haley, I'd give her a 35% chance now, but talk to me in 2 weeks and she might have a 40% chance. I'm going to say this is a real race, and I was thinking about, is it worth going to Iowa? Is it worth going to New Hampshire? I was going to take a look at the trends. But Haley has this continuously upward trend. So certainly worth going out there, of course, which I will. I'm going to check out New Hampshire as well as South Carolina well before the primary to get a read on the voters there. And wanted to give one last bit of polling information, the effect of Robert F. Kennedy. One poll had Trump leading Biden by 1, but then you put Kennedy in there at 13%, and all of a sudden Biden leads Trump by 5% or 4%. So that makes a difference. Another poll has Trump at 39%, Biden at a much weaker 33%, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 19%. Another poll had Trump and Biden within 1 point of each other, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 13%. And one poll noted that he took 9% from Republicans, 9% from Republicans, and 7% from Democrats. So right now, it seems like Biden has an edge, or that Robert F. Kennedy's entry into the race helps Biden more than it hurts him, but I would say barely. And right now, there's only a 2-point discrepancy, generally speaking, about where it's going. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, a lot of the people who are nervous about COVID and might feel a little more conspiratorial, for better or for worse, they would have more in common with Trump about that than they would have with Biden. But they might find Trump's message to be somewhat racist and not kind and not palatable. And RFK is that person. You know, there's a lot of people who are might be more supportive of border security, who might be more wary of vaccines, who might question that narrative, certainly question the narrative of lockdowns. But they don't dislike immigrants. They don't dislike Hispanics. They don't feel like the white race needs to be protected, and they don't believe in white nationalism, and they're not ultra-religious, and they're pro-marijuana legalization, and they're pro-environment. I mean, I think there are a lot of people like that just don't trust the government, but they're not unkind towards other people. And I've spoken with a lot of people who liked Trump generally for not being Biden and for talking about the immigration issues and the issues that were mattered, but they didn't like that he was so unkind towards Hispanics and other types of people, and thought his message was just frankly mean. Trump comes off, for better or for worse, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, Trump comes off as a mean guy. So there's a lot of policies of Trump in a package that is from a much kinder man, which I think makes a real difference. So I think if you talk to a lot of people, there's also peeling a lot from Democrats. So it'll be interesting to see where that plays out. So that's my weekly roundup of the election. You're going to see a lot more videos from me. I was kind of taking my time, getting out there, spending some time with some family up in New York, and then going through West Virginia and Pennsylvania to get out here. But yes, in East Liverpool now, and tomorrow I'm going to head out, interview some friends in East Palestine to talk about that. Also, there's one last thing I want to talk to you guys about, which I'll have some coverage of, is there are 2 elections happening, actually, this election day, which is in a week and 2 days from now. And one is the Kentucky governor's race, which it seems like the incumbent, the Democrat, who was effective in cleaning up a lot of that state and being responsive during a storm. It's a governor's best Christmas gift. They get a storm and they handle it well. So Andy Beshear is running against the Attorney General, David Cameron, interesting African-American GOP gentleman, so certainly a rising star, and actually was fighting against his primaries, and it results in him being the most moderate candidate. So probably the best general election candidate they could get. He's trying to keep Trump at an arm's length, and was very progressive, oddly enough, in a lot of criminal justice and drug reform issues. So he's palatable, but it looks like that Beshear, due to his popularity, is probably going to beat him. And then in Ohio, since I'm right across, well, I'm in Ohio, I mean East Liverpool, Ohio, so we will also talk to people about 2 big referendums: marijuana legalization. Will Ohio legalize it? Governor Mike DeWine has come out in opposition, surprise, surprise. And then abortion. Will abortion rights be protected in the Ohio Constitution, or will it not be? I would say for people on the conservative side of both of these issues, they're out of luck. Right now it's polling at 35% to 50 to 58% respectively on the 58% to 57%, 58% more popular for marijuana. 1% less popular than marijuana would be protecting abortion rights, which is at 57%. But I will be speaking with people in Youngstown, which is a decent-sized city. I'll probably go up to Cleveland as well, just to get a good urban environment, to talk to some people there, and especially maybe some Black Clevelanders. I know some people out there, and how marijuana might affect their businesses, and they plan on getting in, because the marijuana thing is interesting to do a video on, because in Ohio specifically, in 2015, I believe, legalization was on the ballot then, and it failed. A lot of people said the reason that it failed is because Nick Lachey, the husband of Jessica Simpson, formerly of 98 Degrees, essentially wanted to create this pot monopoly and gobble up all the business and make it hard for other organizations to get their licenses. Since then, there's been a big push to get women and minority-owned businesses, and particularly, aside from the race and gender, local-owned businesses to be the first people to get marijuana licenses. So they're trying to do that in Ohio now. But I want to speak with some Black business owners, a few who I might know out in Cleveland, and talk about how that, if Ohio is doing it right this time. Because one of the reasons it didn't win last time was because of the lack of equity in terms of how the business and the licenses would be implemented. And then, finally, you'll hear some more stuff about East Palestine. There's a mayoral election. The mayor of East Palestine, who a lot of people felt like he bungled the response after the chemical train spill, he is running for re-election, so we're going to be on the ground and doing a follow-up. So, been a little bit of a lull, but now you know what's up, and I hope you guys keep watching. Thanks a lot. Bye.